Well, thank you very much for inviting me along today to represent our AHSN proposal. It's great to have heard what the other teams have been thinking about and developing. And I had a call about a month ago from my chief exec, the trust I work on, one of the clinical leaders there, and he said, "Martin, we need an interim managing director for this academic health science network that we're putting together. The prospectus goes in on Monday. Can we put your name against it?" So I said, okay, why not? Been quite involved with innovation, health and wealth from, I was working at the department actually at the time as a national clinical director as that was being drafted. And then also in my clinical leadership role down in Southampton, around making sure we get nice guidance into practice, that we take on innovation. And actually we start to develop, and people, Enby's mentioned quick today, but actually we deliver that whole innovation that drives up quality and productivity and also deals with prevention. So familiar with the agenda, but came to this in terms of Wessex proposal at the time we were putting in our prospectus. But I really had my imagination grasped by this, really. This is a fantastic opportunity, I thought, to get involved in establishing a new approach, and I think, as has been said, actually changing the culture a bit within the NHS in terms of working with industry, working better with social services, and working with third sector as well. So I thought, yeah, great, go for this. In terms of being selected, I think that the Nesta test, I don't know if the Nesta test was applied to me. I was actually driving when I got this phone call, but I did pull to the side of the road, put the handbrake on, and do all the things you're supposed to before answering your phone. I don't know if my chief exec knows how many points or no points I've got on my license, but I guess you probably do need somebody who's willing to be open to risk and to take this sort of project forward. You can ask me later whether there's any points on my license, really. So Wessex, what is it? Well, Wessex in this context is the south bit of Wiltshire, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and people might be familiar with some of the sort of special nature of the Isle of Wight. I don't mean that in a pejorative way at all. In fact, there's been some fantastic work on the Isle of Wight in a number of ways of delivering health, and very positive. And then also Dorset. But also attached to us are Guernsey and Jersey, and we want them involved in our process, although obviously they're quite slightly not quite within the normal NHS boundary. So that's a boundary. I've started, say, recently, and I've been excited by what our intention is. One of the things that put in our prospectus was this propeller, the whole idea of driving forward quality and driving forward both, and in the centre of this, the two key things: improving health and delivering wealth around supporting health businesses. And that includes adopting innovation and building on discovery. So this idea of the four arms of driving forward improvement for patients, but also that will make a difference to the economy and will make us a more successful health service. And the four propeller blades there are collaboration on improvement, working collaboratively with business and smartly with business, a research-led development, and then also actually the implementation science that we need to make the changes. So I guess that's a summary, if you like, of what our vision, what our intent is. I think last speaker commented that we don't want some great big monolith of a structure, and you can see with all those local authorities, those health trusts, and all of them foundation trusts, with all the CCGs across the patch, you could see that you could spend 3 years just sorting yourselves out in terms of your structures. So it's absolutely vital that we don't do that. But we do need some structures in there to help our thinking in terms of the things that we're going to be doing and making the changes on. And we've chosen these 4 areas. So a partnership-wide quality improvement program. So that's very much about, as was mentioned by one of the earlier speakers, reducing variation, getting it right for everybody on every occasion, and actually making a difference to outcomes. My day job in the last sort of few years has been around considering how my own organisation monitors, measures, and improves outcomes. And I have to say, as again has been mentioned, we don't know enough. In fact, we aren't good at recording and measuring and making changes on outcomes. Certainly not systematically. I think often clinicians have their own databases and so on and have their own insight, but comparing that and really understanding that well for organisations and across patches, not so good. But people will be familiar with tools like the Atlas of Variation, which can help us help inform where some of our issues are. The second one on there is the Centre for Implementation Science. We know that inventions come along, they actually are converted into practical applications, and then a few people use them and loads of people don't for many years. One of my clinical responsibilities, well, both I suppose nationally to some extent, but also locally back at Southampton, was leading our work on preventing blood clots, so the whole VTE programme. And if you look at that, we've known for many years that coming into hospital and having surgery and doing certain other things, reducing your mobility, causes you to have a much increased chance of a blood clot. And we've known there are good interventions in terms of the stockings and the injections, and more recently the tablets can prevent that. But have we got together and actually delivered that consistently? No, we hadn't. Some groups perhaps had, until suddenly it became part of a financially driven sequin and a national target, and very much some of the Royal Colleges stepped up to the plate to make this different. So we really need to reduce that time from when we know something's the right thing to do to actually getting it done for everybody consistently, and we need to squeeze that down. And the whole idea of thinking about, well, what are the methodologies that help us do that, is a key part of our plan. These are ideas that are being developed. We probably see this being hosted in one of the universities, perhaps a dispersed model across several of the universities, helping us to make sure we know how to get the changes put into practice. A really important aspect, of course, is the research translation into practice, working with the CLRNs, but also however they change over the next few years into integrated research networks, making sure that we work closely with them to, as was said earlier, that everybody has that chance to participate in a clinical trial so that they can have a good level of care. And the final area is the whole business development and wealth creation area, and what we described in our prospectus as developing a life sciences group, so that we can work with business to help create wealth, make sure we have the right innovations, and we can get those into practice. So those are the four bits of structure, I suppose. Whoops, jumped too far there. Sorry about that. Pause while the technology gets corrected, sorry. So what are the areas that we've talked about? And to some extent this comes out of a joint, what are our research interests on the local patch, and what are the health needs as identified by our public health partners. And I think people might be aware of the great work on nutrition that's centred around University of Southampton and University Hospital Southampton. So that's a really important whole life course from preconception through to death, really, getting nutritional health right. And I think in this field, I think there are a number of tools that are available, for example, nutrition screening tools that we know do make a difference in terms of the way hospital episodes and also in care homes, nutrition can be got right for patients and residents. But actually, is that systematically implemented across the patch? Well, not in Wessex, it isn't. And so perhaps that's an area that we need to start on. We've touched on dementia and the important part of that, and we would support that. Long-term conditions, clearly that's a very broad subject, all-encompassing. I think there's some specific expertise around respiratory and one or two other areas which we'd look at. Alcohol and alcohol overuse perhaps is an area that we want to again focus on. It's some of our research expertise down on the south coast is there. So that would be our sort of 4 areas. The next 3 are more system, if you like, rather than disease focused, and that is the absolute determination that we have to get the high impact innovations in practice and more rapidly than they have been, and also nice technologies. We know, my own background as a pharmacist and working in the Department of Health, very aware that there are significant concerns that even if a technology appraisal comes through, there are still extra barriers that get put in place, or just there's slow uptake, or even just clinician preference when actually I'm not certain that can go unchallenged. Well, I know it can't go unchallenged. So we want to sign up as a network, and this is particularly, I suppose, the healthcare providers, secondary care providers in particular, want to make sure that we have rapid uptake of these innovations and the nice technologies. And so we do need a system that will help us to do that. Information systems and digital solutions clearly can underpin a number of the things we've already talked about, and sort of aren't exactly an end in themselves, but are really important facilitators of the change that we want to deliver. And then I think the last one, I think, comes out of some work that was done across South Central, so that's, you know, up to Oxford and beyond, as well as part of the Wessex patch, the regional enablement programme. And that's about making sure that, okay, access to medicines might exist, but are patients understanding them? Are they involved in that decision-making process? And are they adhering to the regimen that's been agreed? So are we actually making the most of medicines? Oftentimes there's talk about waste of medicine. So how much waste are we burning or putting in landfill sites, or whatever we do with medicines waste? But actually the bigger potential loss is the benefits that we're not grabbing from the medicines that we know work and can make a difference. So touching a little bit then, and I realise that part of today's session, I know, is to listen to your comments, so I'll try and move swiftly on because time is going by. But the life sciences group, as I've mentioned, is the area where we're looking to have engagement with business, and the idea is that the overarching board will have a subgroup, the life sciences working group, and we'll be firing questions that need answering, actions that need delivering to that group, but also be listening to advice on the needs and the opportunities that actually exist out there if only we'd grab them. So if you like, that feedback system. I think we're conscious that as we put this prospectus together, we aren't going to move from suddenly now the things we do to a perfect relationship and, you know, best in the world, best that ever could be way of working with industry. So we need to go on a little bit of a journey together. And this is a diagram. You perhaps can't see the size of the print there, but it starts at the top where we're saying we want to work together to identify existing innovations for adoption and spread. And we've touched on one with the getting the fluids right in surgery. So that's a very simple starting point, working with industry to say, well, you know, what is it that we're getting wrong about not spreading and adopting? And then it moves down to then working to identify existing innovations and adapting them or adopting them. And then the next step would be to work together to create and develop new innovative solutions, and then so on until we get to the bottom where it says work together to identify a research need and share this with the research bodies. So actually saying, well, we know that this doesn't exist, or there's a problem here that needs solving, nobody's really done any work on it, let's get some investment into the research, let's get this as an aspiration so that we can develop the technology. I'd be interested in your comments whether that's pie in the sky or whether that's, you know, an attractive thought. I'm not certain how we get down that journey, but that's something I'd be looking for us as a network with folks like yourselves to work together on and adapt if that's not right. We've tried to develop sort of working models for each of our themes. So we've got a similar diagram to this for the Centre for Implementation Science. We've got a similar diagram for the Quality Improvement Programme. So, what are the steps to get there, and how do we play in together? So I suppose I think there's slightly 3 different colours there, although the one doesn't come across very well. But you can see, so the Life Sciences group is the green bits, and then the partners together are some of the blue bits, and there's a slightly different colour in the middle, which is the implementation science bit. So different parts of our system will help get through to deliver what we want to deliver in terms of building wealth opportunities. So prioritisation on the left, working through to looking for the opportunities, having perhaps cleverer procurement than we've traditionally done in the NHS, and I've got a slide that illustrates maybe a way that would work, but I'm not sure. Then testing, doing the evaluation to test whether this is actually in practice working, so we might have efficacy, but do we have effectiveness? Moving through to local procurement, and then moving on to actually getting external marketing and sales because of the innovation that we've made. A couple of slides now, and then I think I'll finish. Using procurement to implement innovation, I think, is one of the, can we do that? Is that something that can work? And is this a model that helps it work? So, 2 sides of it. Innovation here, I suppose. On the left-hand side is the left-hand side is the new service, and on the right-hand side is that new technology. And I would see that both are things which we need to work not just within the NHS on, but with the private sector and third sector. And I think what we're looking to do is say, well, if we can develop a new technology to deliver change, if that's a thing that can work, what is it that helps provoke that? What is the sand, if you like, in the oyster that produces that pearl? And is that about design competitions? Is it about small business research initiatives which people might be aware of? Is it about a definite commitment to purchase in the future? Are those things that help that? Or do we just let the market rule and reign? And I think the answer to that is probably no, we don't just let the market rule and reign, because we can see the difficulties in the last 20 years of that. But I'm interested in your thoughts on that. And then, a double click again, sorry. And then a final slide, whoops, penultimate slide. A final diagram around this idea of pre-commercial procurement. Is this something that people are familiar with? It's certainly not something I was familiar with until I got involved with our network. I guess the idea is, so what happens mainly at the moment with public sector is that you just work at this end. You put out a tender and people bid for it, and somebody wins. I think the thought here is that there is a relationship that you develop earlier on in that process, where you're looking to get product ideas and solution design and prototype development in partnership between the technology company and the end user, the NHS. And so you go through these phases, and perhaps there might be, well, in this example, there might be 5 companies at the starting block, and then that reduces to 3 at prototyping, and then 2 in the sort of phase 3 development stage. And so you've got that relationship. You're aiming to get a better product at the end of it, but there still is that black line at the end there, and you still would need to go out to public procurement process, and at which point companies, the ones that fell out earlier on, A, B, and E, can come back in, or A, B, and D rather, can come back in, or even another company altogether. So I guess a question for the audience today is this sort of work where you're saying, let's work together before we're ready to go out to tender and have the products available on the market, in a way that should end up with a better product? Or is that just a depressing picture whereby you spend all this time working together and then it just goes out to the process you could have just started with in the first place? So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. And then just to finish then, and I think this is, and apologies, I think Bernard Shaw got this slightly wrong in the sense of he's got one gender, and I think this applies to all people. But he talks about, actually, if you're looking to make a difference, then you need to be unreasonable. So I'm not inviting unreasonable questions or comments, but actually I think this is a really good sort of motto for Academic Health Sciences Network. If we're convinced that we need to change the culture, we need to have a new approach to get innovation that makes a difference for patients and to wealth, then I think we do have to be persistent in looking for the world to change and not just accept it as it is. And that means we're going to have to be unreasonable. So perhaps the job description for a managing director of one of these AHSNs isn't about whether they've got points on their driving license and take risk, but whether they're willing to be unreasonable. So thank you very much.